are the challenges going forward for the type of your entry into farming?
We're trying to make money.
Trying to make money, yeah.
As everyone is in farming. We are a tenanted farm. I'm sure Martin would agree with me on this, who's not in the room at the moment, but our ideal situation is we would like to buy at some point a farm for us, but sometimes it's just not viably possible. Martin always says to his father, when farms were cheaper, back way, it would have been great if we could have bought in then, but we can't just now. So that's where we would like to go to, but it's hard. And it's also harder for younger folk to get into farming, and it's nice to hear, Maddy, that you guys have done, which is great.
It's one of the things Annie and I have found interviewing. The whole new entrant group are very interesting.
Not focusing on one product or type of land-based industry means that we are fortunate that hopefully when 3 things are going down, at least 2 may be going up. So I think that that's very much how we view how we manage the estate, or at least I'm hoping that's how Chalkle will continue to view managing the estate. I think one of the big challenges for all rural land-based industries is broadband, IT skills, which are increasingly essential, and if I dare say it, I think very often women tend to focus on that very expertly. And so for us at the moment, we're facing a big challenge in a major income stream is under threat because of global affairs. And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that we face in Scotland, is how we carry on doing what we do well, how we look after our environment so that we can carry on doing it well, whilst we all know that it's global decisions that are really affecting us.
I do a lot of work with the young crofters through the Scottish Crofting Federation. We've set up a group of, there's only about 20 of us, there's not very many, but we call ourselves the Young Crofters. And 2 years ago we had a big gathering where for over 3 days we came up with all of the things that we felt were an issue with crofting and how we could possibly start solving some of them maybe. But we came up with 4 key things that we feel are issues, and that's access, things that young crofters need, and it's access to land, access to homes, or access to jobs, and access to support. And those are all the things that we've all just said. There's homes is intrinsically linked with the croft. You have your croft house on your croft. I've been doing a lot of lobbying with the government and a lot of work. I know a few people here through that. So there's things like the Croft House Grant Scheme, which will help people build houses on their crofts. They've just increased it, but we're hoping to get the loan element reintroduced as well, which would make a massive difference to people being able to build their own houses. Access to land is obviously a really massive issue. There's so many people who want to get into agriculture or want to get into crofting, but they just can't get the croft. It's so difficult. You either have to inherit it or you have to it's just a really, really difficult process. And there's also vacant crofts, like crofts that are just abandoned and left, and being able to tackle them a little faster. And then jobs, rural communities, there's or being able to earn money on your farm and your croft and being able to actually make it sustainable.
And that whole question of access to land is really interesting. And in some ways, I think this is probably an unusual panel, because I'd say we could have 4 different people from the audience here, and they would have entered agriculture through marrying in, which is the most common route, I think. So I wondered if you wanted to say anything about that, about inheritance and access to land, which is crucial to agriculture and which is still very gendered. Do you think you would have inherited if you'd had brothers? No, I don't think you would have.
I don't think I would have done. I think the difficulty would have been if my sister had been a boy. Yes. Because I think it would have been expected of her. She would never have wanted to do it.
And that is the thing there. I have spoken to some men who didn't want to farm. But exactly. That expectation, it's a negative as well as a positive sometimes.
I would have done something related to agriculture. I'm terribly nosy and interfering, so I probably would have quite liked to be a research scientist, and I know some of the ladies who are in big jobs in there, and really at the back of me, part of me would love to have done that. But I am, Maddy's right, I'm really concerned, but I do think that the sheep job is probably the easiest way to get into it. But we still, us older people, excuse me, Priscilla, but we need to make it available for the youth to get in. I know so many people through NSA who are, you know, landless keepers, but they've got land here and there and everywhere, and they're trying to make a living, and they've got sheep, and they're doing a fantastic job. And really, you know, us old established fat cats, so to speak, we're not giving them a proper chance.
What will happen your farm going forward, do you think?
I'm scared to think.
You don't know?
I've had quite a lot of letters since the programme. Quite a lot of volunteers. And talking back to housing, quite a lot of people quite concerned that we live in that barn. Which we probably do. We too have a housing issue. As I say, and I'm now at the stage we've actually now managed to replace the roof on the farmhouse after, you know, 30 years, because the inheritance tax was the first thing, and then getting the stock sorted out was the next thing, and then whatever else, taking on the tenancy of next door was the next thing. So actually our comfort, well, we live outside most of the time, and it's very wet and cold and horrible in Argyll, so the house was the last thing, but we're getting there as pension-age looms. We're on to the housing, so you're well ahead, Maddy, well ahead.
Priscilla, you said your family have been there for 400 years?
My husband's family, yes.
Your husband's family?
See, now that's interesting, because I will always say my husband's family.
Okay.
Okay, so I've been married for over 40 years. And it's probably only recently that I could say, we do this. And then I think, well, what's higher status? If you inherit it or if you marry into it? And actually, does it really matter, other than what you do with it? But I have found that an issue throughout my life.
Melissa, Erin's how many months old?
7.
And she's been shearing sheep in the tractor.
Yeah.
So would you hope that whatever you and your husband build, that one of your children will keep on?
I'd like to think that we'll give them the opportunity. If they want to carry on, fantastic. If they don't, I'm not going to push it. Can't push anyone into doing something that they don't want to do. I was encouraged very much by my parents. You know, you want to do that, you go for it. You know, I was never forced to do anything or told, you know, you can't. I remember a story that will stick with me for life is we were on my grandfather's farm, and my oldest brother was in the digger with my granda, and my mum had me in a little tartan frilly dress, and I just turned to my mum and said, "Can girlies do that?" And she said, "Girlies can do that," and picked me up and put me in the digger. And, you know, that'll always stay with me, that, you know, she encouraged me, if that's what I want to do, that's what you can do.
One thing I want to come back to, a number of you have mentioned being involved with the NFU and being conspicuous as being one of the only women. And I've heard quite a lot of talk about the farming organisation, some very heated conversations about the Crofting Commission and Federation and NFU, and you're president of the Sheep Association and so on. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on farming organisations. Are they more representative of women? Are they still gendered? What are your views?
I think they're slowly becoming more. There's more women for events like this, and pulling more women together. And like Sybil says, you've got a good opinion and you want it voiced. I think more women are getting like that, and not as if they're not allowed into it, but that, you know, the opportunity is there. But you go to a mart and look round, and it's all older men. So, like Priscilla said, it's lovely to see as many young people here today.
And I think being allowed to enter isn't exactly the same thing as there not being a barrier to entry.
Some people
if you're
might
still conspicuous.
Yeah, because farming or agriculture is a male-dominated industry, but no one said no, women can't do that. It's always the thought of, oh, I really shouldn't do that because I'm female. But
what about the sheep people?
Oh,
does being president?
They're a misogynistic bunch, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, they are. I mean, there's a trustee in Wales who's a lady, but in general, on the board of trustees, they're all male. Yes, that's right. And I know certainly, you know, lots of farming families. If they say, for example, there's a meeting on tonight, but wee Freddie's got a cold. Well, I mean, there's no thought that Mrs. should continue to go to the meeting. It's just the rule, you know. It just happens that Mr. Farmer would go and Mrs. Farmer would stay at home, and that's just the way it is. And, you know, I've got lots of opinions, and you've been kind to me, Mel, because probably a lot of them are not very welcome. And I don't think there's really that many men out there who think that we shouldn't be there.
No, I would agree
It's
with
just
that.
the way it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just what the expectation is.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't been a woman where I was, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. The opportunities don't come along easily, and the expectation's different.
It's that same thing of expectations can alter behaviour, though. You know, if you never think of applying to Cambridge, nobody was stopping you, but it is about having that mental space to think, yes, and for organisations to be aware that you can be brought in different ways. But I'll come back onto that. Priscilla, do you want to?
I was just wondering if they hold men in agriculture events.
Well, exactly, yes.
And whether
exactly.
whether I would want to go, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Maddy, do you want to say anything?
I think because I'm quite new to it, I maybe haven't noticed it quite as much. But I've never felt that I've not been welcome anywhere, just because I'm a woman.
We are very used to something being the way it is and thinking that that's just how it is, and that it couldn't be different. And I think it's something like this, and having a dialogue here today, that then maybe when we go into a more diverse situation, we go, do you know what, actually it's okay to say that.
And that leads nicely into the next question I wanted to ask, because I think you're quite right. By definition, this is a gendered event because it states it in the title. It's women in agriculture. One of the things I've wondered about over the years is whether having a women in agriculture event means, well, that's for the women, and we'll get on with the mainstream business, as we always do in those organisations. Or do you see these types of events as a way of broadening into something bigger?
I think it's a start. I think something women are really good at is taking risks, because we tend to have more things that are on the go at the same time. So a bit like an estate, if one thing doesn't do so well, well, hey, you know, child won a prize at school today, so I'm cheered by that, even though something else went wrong. But so I think it's by doing that it gives confidence to the people who are there, or to other organisations when you go there, that goes, there's a different way to do it. It might not be better, but it's different, and let's give it a try.
This is not a dig at NFUS per se. Its constitution makes it very difficult for women to progress up the ladder, because you have to do it from the bottom up, which is perfectly right, and it should be. But the problem is that very often the local branch meetings are not a happy place for a woman on her own to be. It is a meet and a greet and a moan. There will be exceptions, of course, but on the whole, even the youngsters, male youngsters, won't go to the branch meetings because they're simply that, and they will not waste their time. So we're losing out on the influence of more open-minded youngsters and the female perspective. And I think that's a huge challenge for NFUS, because the structure is such that you have to become a branch chair, then you have to become a board chair before you will even be considered for getting onto the main board. And it's the main board that makes the many decisions, which don't always reflect the feeling amongst the majority of the membership.
I'm the current chair of Lorne Branch at the moment, and it's fantastic to see how many young people we have coming to our meetings, and I hope that us oldies don't put them off. But I hear what you're saying. As I mentioned earlier, I do sit on the LFA committee and have done for years, and the support from Johnny Hall and Rob and many others along there, you know, they have been very nice. I think they probably still laugh and say, oh, not that blooming woman from Argyll again. But they have, but you're right. It is pretty difficult, and I hope there's some young lady here, or maybe not even so young, sitting here who'll be the president of the union one day.
I don't often disagree with Day Tucker. I don't often dare to disagree with Day Tucker. But I think she has to remember that young people nowadays are so busy trying to earn a living, trying to bring up a family, trying to do all sorts of things. It's only boring old farts like me that have time to sit on committees. I think that's part of the problem with the structure, not necessarily that young people don't want to go along to meetings.
I just want to agree with Jill about the NFU and the meetings. It tends to be, I'm at an age now where I have a young family. I can't go out at night. My husband could, because like you said, if something comes up, I'll be the one now to stay at home with the girls. But I see the SAYFC logo up there. Is there something that SAYFC could do with NFU to connect the two generations, so there's not the lost generation, if you like, in the middle?
I think that's a really interesting question, because certainly that's something we're saying, that women can often have quite, you know, senior roles in young farmers, but it doesn't translate into the NFU. And I think you're quite right, that they're very different organisations in their structure and in terms of what they do. I mean, yeah, Young Farmers sometimes looks to me like a dating agency. But you're right that you have a captive group there, and that maybe there is some work that could be done moving forward. I also think it's interesting that you would never think of going to the NFU meetings. Does notice of meetings, is it addressed to both of you?
I should have said I farm at home with my mother and father. My husband has his own farming business, so anything that comes in is addressed to the business. And yes, I suppose I would look at that and I would, oh yes, that looks quite interesting, and I would go, but it's 7:30 at night, and
Sure.
I'm in the middle of bath time.
Yeah.
So it's not until, like Jill was saying, it's not until you get past that stage when your family's a bit older, then you are able to go. And I suppose in a way the NFU are maybe missing a trick there, in that my generation are not able to contribute perhaps as much as they could, and it's not until you get older that you can get out of the house and attend these things. And I'm not suggesting it's a barrier to women exclusively, but just to men and women who are at that stage in their careers.
Sure.
I think maybe the two organisations should put their heads together.
Chairman, Jill Laurie again from Angus. Could I take us right back, change the subject completely, and take us right back to some comments that you made at the very start of the afternoon about succession of land ownership, of holding ownership. The Scottish Government is pushing through their land reform legislation at the moment, which has some quite concerning aspects in it for existing land holdings. And I have to say here that I'm very fortunate to be part of a farming family in Angus. It's 3 units run as one. My son and daughter are both following us on. The unit as it is viable. If you split it up into the 3 units, they become unviable. I'd like to hear the panel's views on how feasible it is to create more land available for new entrants, but at the same time bearing in mind the viability of existing holdings.
You're absolutely right, and I think we are in a difficult place, both from the tenanted side of it and from the owner side of it. And you're absolutely right. You know, you start dividing up units into smaller sections, and they just don't become viable. So the sort of idealistic idea of let's give everyone, you know, Maddy and everyone a piece and let them at it, you know, it sounds a great idea, but in practicality, if it's not a big enough piece of land to support that unit, family, whoever they are, then it doesn't work. And I think the uncertainty and the difficulties that have been over land reform over the last few years, I think, really haven't helped anybody, to be honest. There is land there, and again, I think it's the uncertainty as to, you know, the right to buy things still niggles on in the background and things like that, where people would love to lease Maddy, you know, but they're terrified what they might do if once you've built your palace and you've got all your there, you know, as to how it goes, and that doesn't help anybody, I don't think.
I know a few people that have split crofts up, quite large ones into smaller ones, but I think crofting's quite different to farming, where it's more of a lifestyle. Well, crofting was designed not to be viable. Like, the landowners wanted you to work on the estates as a second job. So I think the people that I speak to about crofting certainly just want that little bit just to live on, just to have as a thing, not necessarily to have it as a big business. So it's maybe a bit different.
Priscilla?
It's something that's really challenged us, talking about the viability of business, because we're an estate much bigger. Well, then we're much bigger, I was going to say, but actually in value terms, we're probably worth far less than a small area of land in East Lothian, because the quality of the land's quite different. And it's really challenged us as a family, because we say we want to hand on a viable business. And so my very astute, well, all my children are astute, but this one particularly said, so what's a viable business? It was one of her first questions 8 years ago, and we haven't got the answer yet. And it changes. I was talking to your mother-in-law yesterday, who said, sheep are great at the moment. I bet if you'd asked her a few years ago, she wouldn't have had the same opinion. Sheep weren't great. When we first went into sheep, they weren't great. Thanks to you. They're great now. But it changes. And so working out what's a viable business and how you hand it on, I think is really, really challenging. And I think it's exciting that we're talking about it.
Can succession planning be a difficult issue to broach?
I think
Oh,
it,
yeah, because it's talking about me dying. And it's difficult for the children, because they're talking about me dying. But I quite frankly believe it's better to talk about it while I'm alive, funnily enough, but also whilst we can talk about it, rather than the lawyer turning up and saying, so what are you going to do?
I want to carry on for what Day was saying, because I do actually agree with Day. There is a disassociation, I think, for many women like myself, who is married to a farmer, but in fact has a job and a business herself away from the farm. There's a lot of women who are in the back row of agriculture, as people like myself are, who are not actually, I would never dream of going to an NFU meeting. I would never dream about going to something like this until probably I met people like Day and Frida and all the other people that I'm friendly with who are, you know, we have a way of saying things that probably are slightly controversial, but it's actually to stimulate that interest in other women. And I, like so many other women today, asked other women to come today, and I'm one of the people who actually contacted 20 people, and I'm the only person out of the 20 who came today, because we are disassociated from agriculture.
Where we are now as a business, my husband and I decided very early on that we wanted to be price makers, not price takers. We saw the agricultural industry being very vulnerable to volatilities and everything. So now what we do, we've built a butchery on the farm, and all our livestock go through our butchery, and we sell direct to restaurants, hotels, online. And one thing we've learned as farmers is how important it is to connect as farmers with the product that's sold on the supermarket shelves. And yes, we need to see what the label is saying, selling our products as farmers. So all I'd say is that as farming businesses, we need to connect with our products much more than we do. And I would really strongly recommend all farmers to connect with your product on the shelf. It gives us a much stronger way of arguing for a better price.